All right, guys, I apologize. I'm not here today. So I'm going to walk you through one question of each. That way you guys could know what to do. The first part of this worksheet, numbers 1 through 5, is factoring by grouping. So I'm going to go with first one. Okay, that's probably the easiest one. Probably shouldn't do the first one. Anyways, it's all done the same, though. What is step 1 on factoring by grouping? You have to separate it into two groups. So let's first do that. Just put the first two and then space and then the second two. So as you could see, all I did was provide a space between the first two terms written right there and the second two terms written right there. The next thing on factoring by grouping is to factor whatever you can out of the first group. So obviously there are no numbers, but there are x's. You could definitely pull out a total of x squared in that first group. What would be left over if you pull out an x squared? Well, x squared times what would take you back to that x to the third. That would simply be an x. And then x squared times what will take you back to a 1x squared. That would simply be a plus 1. Okay, now let's do the same for the second group. Second group, what do I have in common here? What could I pull out? I could pull out a 3, but even better, pull out a negative 3. That way, when you pull out a negative 3, you will have positive values inside your parentheses left over, and that's what you want. You want these to be identical. Okay, so let's see, negative 3 times what gets you a negative 3x? That would simply be a regular x. And then negative 3 times what would get you a negative 3? That would simply be a plus 1. So that is step 2. After separating, creating two groups, you pull out what you can from the first group, pull out what you can from the second group. And now step 3 is to take a step back and factor out that common binomial that's in both groups. So I recommend doing your exaggerated parentheses right there and pull out that common binomial of x plus 1. So what would be left on the inside? Well, you'd have this x squared right there, and you'd have the minus 3 right there. Again, I do exaggerated parentheses so you could clearly see that there's something missing right here. There's the x plus 1 and the x plus 1. That used to be here, now it's out here. You factored it out. So that's why we have this blank spot on both of those areas. So anyways, our final answer is x plus 1 parenthesis x squared minus 3. All you have to do is rewrite it with the correct size parentheses. So you're going to do the same for number 2. You're going to do the same for number 3. Separate them into two groups. Even 4 and 5, these look weird, but it's done the same exact way, guys. Just separate them into two groups. Factor out something from the first group, factor out something from the second group, take a step back, factor out the common binomial from both groups. All right, now down here, yes, we're going to continue with factoring by grouping, but we need to know how to factor quadratic trinomials when a is not equal to 1, okay? So I'll do number 6, and hopefully you guys continue and do 7 through 9. So step 1 on number 6, I hope we remember that. Step 1 is to multiply a times c. So a is 6, c is negative 6. So a times c is negative 36. Step 2 is to make a list of the multiples of that answer from step 1, which is negative 36. So how could I get negative 36? Negative 1 times 36, negative 2 times 18, negative 3 times 12, negative 4 times 9, negative 5 doesn't work, negative 6 times 6. So those are all the possible ways of multiplying two numbers together to get the answer negative 36. So the question is, which pair of numbers combines together to give you the middle value, b, which happens to be negative 5? So if you start combining, this will give you 35, this will give you 16, this will give you 9, this will give you 5. So this is the right pair of numbers, but notice this is a negative 5, not a positive 5. And if I combine the negative 4 and the 9, that'll give me a positive 5. So I have the right numbers, I just have the wrong signs. So I'm going to switch them. I want to make this a positive 4 and a negative 9. So this is the correct pair of numbers that I want. And now after that is step 3, and step 3 is where it definitely gets weird. What is step 3? You rewrite this trinomial, but instead of negative 5x, instead of this middle value, you're going to rewrite it as two separate terms with the numbers from step 2. So instead of negative 5x, you're going to rewrite it as 4x minus 9x. So let's rewrite the whole thing. We have the beginning 6x squared. We have the end, the minus 6. But in between the minus 5x, instead of writing minus 5x, I want to rewrite it as plus 4x minus 9x. Let's write that down. plus 4x minus 9x. Okay? So what did we do here? We converted a trinomial into a 4-term polynomial. Why the heck would we want to do that? Change 3 terms into 4 terms? That way we could factor by grouping. So I am going to rewrite my expression up here, but I am going to leave some space between my first group and my second group, right? I want to leave some space right between the positive 4x and the negative 9x. So here we go. 6x squared plus 4x space minus 9x minus 6. That's the first step on factoring by grouping. You make some space between your first group and your second group, the first 2 terms and the second 2 terms. Second step is to factor out the GCF from the first group, which happens to be 2x. And if you pull out a 2 and an x, 2x times what will get you back to a 6x squared. That will be a 3x. 2x times what will get you back to a 4x. That will be a 2. Okay, now let's pull out what's in common in the second group. In the second group, we could actually pull out a 3, but it's better to pull out a negative 3. That way, you'll end up with positive terms on the inside. Check it out. Negative 3 times what will get you a negative 9x? That will be a positive 3x. And then negative 3 times what will get you a negative 6? Well, that would be a positive 2. And again, these binomials have to be identical. They have to be a common binomial in your first group and your second group so you could pull out that common binomial. And that is the next step on factoring by grouping, to do some exaggerated parentheses and pull out that common binomial from your first group and your second group, which happens to be the 3x plus 2. Okay? So what would be left on the inside of the exaggerated parentheses? You have this 2x left over, you have the minus 3 left over, and that's your factored form answer. Okay? Of course, you want to write it with the correct size parentheses. So the answer, the factored form answer is 3x plus 2 times 2x minus 3. Now let's say you're second guessing yourself. Let's say, I'm not sure if this is the right answer. You could always distribute 3x times 2x and get the 6x squared that you started with. Then 3x times negative 3 would be negative 9x. 2 times 2 is 4 with an x. The negative 9x and the 4x cancels out, or not cancels out, but it combines together to give you the middle value. Of course, if you were to show this work, you will end up with this exact quadratic trinomial, therefore giving you confidence that this is the correct answer. Okay, so I do apologize. I just wanted to do one of each, and I want you guys to do the rest in class right now with the sub. And the answers are posted in the back of the classroom. There it is. Answers are posted right there. This is your assignment to do this worksheet, WSP 4.3 D3. That means same section 4.3 day 3, and we're doing 1 through 9. So your answers are right here. Now, of course, I could have made a mistake, so please let me know if you find any mistakes on the answer sheet. Anyways, please finish this. If you don't finish it, it's homework. You need to have this complete, and also make sure everything's completed from your notes and from the class opener from yesterday. See you guys tomorrow.